Michigan TV.
Looking for the perfect weekend getaway? Love Lansing like a local. And we promise, you'll love Lansing just as much as we do.
You're watching My Michigan TV.
It's time for Lehto Live. Join author, historian, radio host, and YouTube sensation Steve Lehto as he breaks down Michigan's top stories, talks with business leaders and professional experts, and checks out the variety of statewide festivals and events that Michigan has to offer. You're watching Lehto Live on My Michigan TV.
Welcome to My Michigan Television. I am Steve Lehto. It's a Monday. In Michigan, it's beautiful out. It's a bit chilly. It's going to warm up. It's a warming trend. And I know that this right now is right about the beginning of spring, and it'll feel like it. 36 degrees right now, but 48 for high today. Tomorrow, 54. Stays in the warm range for the rest of the week. Now, it could rain on Wednesday and Thursday, but be in the 50s. I'll take it. Friday, 44. Saturday, Sunday, 43, 53. But as long as the numbers stay above freezing, I really don't care. Now, went for a drive on Saturday, and the weirdest phenomenon occurred. Driving along, blue skies, but off in the distance, darkness. And then a few miles later, all of a sudden, a blinding blizzard. And then all of a sudden, blue skies again. It was the weirdest thing, these hit and miss flurries. And it got thick at a couple points in time. And this lasted pretty much all afternoon. Now, when I was driving through it, it didn't get treacherous, but apparently it got treacherous out on I-96. So there are now stories and things that have hit the news. And now we're hearing that there are no serious injuries in an I-96 pileup that involved 150 vehicles. 150 vehicles. Now, here's the thing. I was actually scrolling through Twitter because I was the passenger. I can do that while I'm the passenger in the car. I was scrolling through Twitter. And I have to say that because one time I said I was going someplace in a car and I was checking my email and I got hundreds of people who commented, you can't check your email while you're driving. That's dangerous and illegal. And I said, I never said I was driving. I said I was in a car going someplace. I was a passenger in the car. However, I saw a tweet from the Michigan State Police saying avoid this stretch of road because, number one, it's dangerous. And number two, we've got a multi-car pileup with as many as 100 cars. Turns out it's 150. So Jakar Amory wrote this to Detroit News that a pileup on I-96 in West Michigan over the weekend involved 150 cars, according to Michigan State Police, who responded and tweeted about it. The crash has occurred on a 5-mile stretch on eastbound 96 near Grand River Avenue and Portland Road in Portland in Ionia County, according to Michigan State Police. There were reports of whiteout conditions. 86 cars were damaged. 66 went off the road. No serious injuries were reported, though. 16 people were transported to the hospital, according to the state police. I remember driving one day in the summertime, and it started to rain, and it started raining so hard I couldn't see. I actually pulled over to the side of the road and waited a while, and then eventually the rain blew over. But for about 3 minutes, it was literally impossible to see. And I had my windshield wipers going full blast, nothing. And all I was thinking the whole time I was on the side of the road, because this is on I-94, I was on the side of the road thinking, please don't anybody hit me. No cars passed while I was out there either. This is in the middle of the day. So it was crazy, but these things can happen and they can happen quickly. That's the scary part. Cheyenne Queen of Grand Rapids was driving eastbound on 96 between the Grand River and Portland exits when she and her daughter feared a vehicle would hit theirs near the end of the pileup. I told my daughter to move to the front seat from the back in case we got sandwiched, she told the Detroit News. Fortunately, we did not get hit, and the pileup stopped with us and the car behind me. So they were late to the party, which is good, but there are other people in there who probably got hit more than once. The Portland Area Fire Authority said on Facebook at about 4:40 p.m. Saturday, that's when the pileup occurred, about 4:40 in the afternoon on Saturday. We are working a 50-plus car accident on I-96 around 77 miles to 72-mile markers. So avoid the highway, the fire official said. A lake effect snow advisory was in effect for portions of central, south central, southwest, and west central Michigan until 2 a.m. Sunday, with snowy accumulations of up to 3 inches and wind gusts as high as 35. But see, that did not carry much further inland than this. I think this is probably around the edge of where they got it, because we got no accumulation Saturday to Sunday. Now, there was a dusting of snow, but I don't even think you could measure it. It was literally just a dusting. Like if you walk through it, it would kind of blow away from your feet like that. So occasional whiteout conditions in falling and blowing snow continue this evening. Radar and satellite shows cellular lake effect snow as steep lapse rate, high inversion height, and March sun combined to bring snow downpours, according to the Weather Service. So snow downpours. Apparently they're having a hard time describing this unusual phenomenon. Inversion heights, according to the Weather Service, are a key regulator of lake effect snow intensity. Deeper updrafts will mean heavier precipitation, whether snow or rain. So what happens with lake effect is there's moisture always coming off the lake unless it's frozen over. So if there's open water, moisture does come up off the lake. That moisture comes up and combines with what's already in the sky and intensifies the precipitation that results thereof. So in a snowy situation, you can get heavy whiteouts like this, or you can get the heavy rains like I was talking about, which happen closer to the water due to lake effect. The Michigan Department of Transportation reported the closing of the freeway near exit 73 in a tweet. Westbound and eastbound were affected. Authorities asked drivers to avoid that stretch of freeway. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Steve, why would they close the other side of the freeway? 2 reasons. One is that people are going to be looky-loos and want to rubberneck and watch as they pass by the wreckage. But number 2, the same conditions that caused that are present on both sides of the road. It wasn't just divided with bad weather here, good weather here, but also to reach it. I guess it's 3 reasons. To reach the people who needed help, the easiest access is the other side of the road, just across the median. So all the fire trucks and ambulances and first responders can all come down and go along the westbound, which is open, with their vehicles, jump over any barriers if there are any, and then get to the people they need to help, and then use that other side for entry and exiting. So at 9:34 p.m., MSP said lanes heading westbound had opened while troopers continued to clear the remaining vehicles in the eastbound lanes. Less than an hour later, they tweeted, the freeway is back open. So it's about 10 o'clock on Saturday night, got shut down about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, along with MDOT confirming all lanes open after the Portland Road exit were open. A warming and family reunification center was set up at the Portland Church of the Nazarene in Portland for those involved in the crash, MSP said on Twitter. Buses are being used to transport involved parties. Family members can pick up at that location after giving info to troopers. So they were helping people out, moving them around. And the scary part about this is, and I've actually read quite a few articles about these. I'm fascinated because I used to drive a tow truck. I drove a tow truck for a couple of years, in the city of Birmingham, Michigan, Oakland County. And we did towing for the Birmingham Police Department. And so we would get called to accident scenes. They say, here's a couple wrecked vehicles, get them out of here. And the weird thing is that back then we had wreckers that could only handle one car at a time. Now we had 2 wreckers. So if we got a call for 2 wreckers during the day, we could take care of it. But I remember showing up at an accident scene at night. There's 2 cars. And the cop goes, I need you to move both these cars. And I'm like, okay. So I got to hook one up, take it back to the station, come back and get the other one. And I remember on one occasion, at least, where a police officer goes, I don't want both these cars sitting in the intersection while you dilly-dally with this, take one back. So I had to hook one up, drag it over to a side street, unhook it, go get the other one, take that back to the station, come back and get the one that I just dragged and take it back. So it created even more work than you would have had just to tow the 2 vehicles. And so when I hear about an accident that involves 150 vehicles, now Portland is not a real small town, but it's also not a big megalopolis. And I'm not sure what else is near there. But even if you had every wrecker within a 10-mile radius respond to this wreck, it's still going to take some time to move 150 cars. Now, it's unclear if every single one had to be removed by a wrecker, but it sounds like a lot of them were. So if you're stuck in the middle, presumably you could drive your car out of there once everything got cleared. But it sounds like the police were saying, look, we need to clear this ourselves. And if you are in there and you're not injured, we're just going to take you to a warming center rather than have you sit out here for 6 hours, because that's how long the highway was closed, and take you to a warming center, and then you just call and your vehicle will get towed. So the sad part I have to tell you about is that there are people out there who are probably stuck in the middle of that. Their car wasn't damaged because they got lucky and pulled over or something. And a cop comes by and goes, hey, it's going to be 3-4 hours. We can't let you sit here in your car for 3 or 4 hours. So go with that nice man there, get on the bus there, go to the warming center at the church, and then call loved ones to come get you. What about my car? It's going to get towed. Call this number and your car gets towed. You just got stuck with a towing bill. And nowadays, towing bills ain't cheap. Now, you'll recall about a year ago, I had a woman on this show whose car got involved in an accident. I believe it was on 696, just northwest of Detroit a little ways. And when she had her car towed, she wound up getting hit with a bill that was just insanely large, thousands of dollars. And she tweeted about it, I believe, and the news picked up the story. And people were going insane because this tow truck company tried to rip her off. And that's one of the problems, is that a lot of times the municipalities will just simply get a bunch of tow truck companies, put them on a list and go, we'll just call you, you come tow the truck, and you deal with the billing. But they don't tell the tow truck companies that they have any rules about who they, what they can charge. And so I can tell you that when we were talking to the city of Birmingham, they had fixed rates. They go, here's what we'll pay. And so the police called us. We actually billed the police, and I believe the police billed the people whose car got towed. But it was a set rate, and it was a complicated rate. It was, the old so much for the tow truck to show up, so much per mile for us to tow it. And then there's extra charges if I had to use a fire extinguisher or if there's a lot of cleanup involved. Once in a while, you show up at an accident. I remember showing up at one where a vehicle had flipped and pretty much all the window glass was busted out of it. And I was out there with a push broom and a little thing trying to, little dust catch, trying to clean up this mess for like half an hour. And you better believe we charged for that. Just thinking about that reminds me of coming home from work with battery acid burns on my hand, smelling of antifreeze and transmission fluid because of all the things that leak out of a vehicle and got smashed. But the good news is no serious injuries. But right about now, there are a ton of people trying to track down and get their cars back. And unfortunately for many of them, through no fault of their own, they have a towing bill they got to pay that's going to be hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So I talked last week about the band The Cure and how I tried to get tickets and failed and how I thought the whole thing was a boondoggle. Well, there's a little bit of good news, I still don't have tickets to the show, but good news right after this on My Michigan Television.
Welcome to Mackinac Island.
We were just named the #1 island destination in the continental U.S. by Travel and Leisure magazine.
We are proud of our little slice of paradise.
And hope we have a chance to visit soon.
So hop on in and treat yourself
It's a fascinating history.
delicious island traditions,
and an unforgettable nightlife.
We look forward to seeing you soon on Mackinac Island.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
I mentioned last week that they announced ticket sales for a band called The Cure. Of course, that's a British band, and they don't tour that often. I've seen them live one time back in 1991, put on a great show. And so I wanted to see them again, but trying to get tickets was an impossibility because of the way they do these things these days. And I complained about this repeatedly on this channel and pointed out how sad it is that someone who's a super fan can't get tickets. And nowadays, there's a couple of different issues going on in the world of tickets. And one of the things is that they finally realized, hey, look, if we sell the tickets for $50 and the show is hot, someone's going to buy the tickets for $50 and scalp them for $400. Why should we let scalpers make all the money when we can make it? So they introduced a thing called dynamic pricing, where when they detect that more people want the tickets, they just raise the prices. So I've heard stories about like Bruce Springsteen or Adele, and people trying to buy tickets, and they discover the tickets are literally thousands of dollars face value. It's like, what? And so The Cure didn't want to do that. So Robert Smith, the lead singer and leader of the band, said that when they went to Ticketmaster and said, we want you guys to sell our tickets for our American tour, we do not want that dynamic pricing. Don't do that. We wanted to simply sell the tickets for face value. Do what you can to limit who gets them so scalpers don't buy up thousands of them and just flip them. So if you wanted to buy tickets a week or two before they went on sale, you had to go in and register your name, address, phone number, email, all this information to make sure that you're a real person, and then you'd be limited to 4 tickets. And I got a note saying you can now log in and buy tickets, and it didn't matter. No matter what I did, it wouldn't sell me tickets. So I was upset about that. But the weird part is that there's been stuff about this band in the news with the tickets ever since, because a lot of people pointed out that they'd buy a $20 ticket and it would have a $25 service charge. So instead of the band ripping people off, it was Ticketmaster. At least that's the way it looks. And so The Cure's Robert Smith convinced Ticketmaster to refund the unduly high fees after fan anger. And this is from The Guardian, which is a British newspaper. Sian Kane wrote this. The ticketing giant will refund at $10 to fans who bought cheapest tickets in the band's U.S. tour and $5 to everyone else after Robert Smith asked for an explanation. $5 back when you've been charged 20 or 30 for, just the fees on each ticket, which, by the way, they don't even mail you the tickets. They email you a thing that says, here's your ticket. There's no postage. There's no handling. There's no nothing. It's just all done by a computer. Ticketmaster will refund some of its fees to fans buying tickets for the Cure's U.S. tour after frontman Robert Smith took them to task over their unduly high fees that were, in some cases, adding up to more than the price of the ticket. Smith told fans he was sickened as you all are, and he would contact Ticketmaster after many took to social media to complain about the ticket sales behemoth's additional fees. I have been asked how they are justified, he wrote. If I get anything coherent by way of an answer, I'll let you know. And here's the thing. Ticketmaster is not used to this kind of pushback. They expect the bands to like them because the bands usually get a slice of all this extra money. But where it's all service fees, no, Ticketmaster keeps it. The band had purposefully kept tickets affordable with some as low as $20, but fans shared screenshots of Ticketmaster shopping baskets with varying fees across different venues. One image showed combined fees that exceeded the cost of a $20 ticket, each subject to a service fee of $11.65 and a facility charge of $10. Then there was the processing fee of $5.50, again, per ticket. The fees were levied by Ticketmaster as part of its verified fan program, which is why I registered and got nothing, which allowed fans to register for an advance sale that was aimed at preventing tickets being sold to people who'd scalp them or bots that would be programmed to buy them. Later on Thursday, Smith issued an update. After further conversation, Ticketmaster have agreed with us that many of the fees being charged are unduly high, and as a gesture of goodwill, have offered a $10 per ticket refund to all verified fan accounts for the lowest price tickets in the transactions that you've had. For all fans who bought the more expensive tickets, Ticketmaster will issue a $5 refund per ticket for any show on the U.S. tour. Refunds will be automatic for anyone who'd already bought a ticket, while future ticket sales would simply incur lower fees. Earlier in the week, Smith explained the band had chosen to use Ticketmaster in order to combat scalping, but had declined to participate in the company's dynamic pricing and platinum ticket schemes, as they did not want ticket prices to be instantly and horribly distorted by resale. But as I told you, the tickets supposedly went on sale on Wednesday. The previous week, you could find ticket sites on the internet selling tickets to the Cure at Pine Knob, and they'd say, we've got tickets in this row, these seats, do you want them? They're $800 a piece. Now, how they got those tickets, I don't know. Supposedly, that was impossible. Supposedly. Musicians such as Bruce Springsteen and Taylor Swift have used dynamic pricing, which has seen individual tickets end up selling for thousands of dollars. I don't know if this is a reflection on anything. I could possibly see spending thousands of dollars for good Bruce Springsteen tickets, but you'd have to pay me thousands to go to a Taylor Swift concert. And that's not with dynamic pricing. That's just me saying I wouldn't want to go see her. The backlash to the Cure ticket fees is the latest example of Ticketmaster's sales model provoking anger. In November, it canceled the general sale for tickets for Swift's Eras tour because demand for the verified fan sale had left insufficient remaining ticket inventory. Swift described the situation as excruciating, while the U.S. Congress called for a breakup of Ticketmaster, and Live Nation, which merged in 2010, calling it a monopoly, and it obviously is a monopoly. In January, the U.S. Senate held a hearing about the company and heard testimony about ticket sales, monopolization, resale markets, and Ticketmaster's influence on the live music industry. Now, I'm trying to remember if I've ever bought tickets from a scalper, per se, and I don't think I ever have. I've bought tickets to shows, and I've gone to shows. I've mentioned recently I've seen some shows in recent times. I saw Alan Parsons at the Royal Oak Music Theater. I saw Gary Newman play in Detroit. I saw a band called Blue October play a few times. I also saw Future Islands play at the Royal Oak Music Theater not so long ago. Every one of those shows, I logged on and bought the tickets and just paid face value for them. The show for Alan Parsons, the tickets were, I think, 100 and change a piece, like 125, 150, something like that, which is kind of pricey for tickets that I'd paid for. A couple of other shows weren't that expensive. But the thing is that this has all changed over the years. And I remember the old CTC, Convenient Ticket Corporation, I believe it was. And CTC was the first company that said that we will sell tickets off-site from various venues around Detroit. So if a show is going to be at Cobo Hall or Joe Louis or Pine Knob, you could buy the tickets from CTC. And CTC had outlets in various places. I mentioned this before, a kiosk at the mall or at the customer service center at Hudson's or Macy's or Marshall Fields, whatever it was at that time. And you could even go to a travel agency, because apparently the travel agencies, the equipment they used to make reservations for the airlines were very, very similar to the equipment used by CTC. So I remember specifically that you could go to a travel agency and buy tickets. And the reason I remember this so vividly is that in 1979, I remember getting up one morning, and I did not have to work on a Saturday morning. I think I was working that afternoon at the gas station. And I remember getting up in the morning and turning my radio on to WABX. I'm pretty sure it's WABX I was listening to at that time. And WABX, which of course is 99.5 FM, which is right there. I'm always off. I'm always. But WABX in Detroit was the cool rock station, but there were 4 rock and roll stations. Turned the radio on that morning, and it's like 9:45 when I heard this announcement. And the weekend DJ comes on and goes, big announcement. Van Halen coming to Cobo Hall. And tickets go on sale at 10 o'clock. And they made the announcement literally the morning tickets went on sale. So it's not like somebody could go and sleep in line expecting this. And so it's like, whoa, Van Halen tickets. This is early in their career. This is long before, like Jump and all that stuff. I jumped in my car and raced up Maple Road and went to, at the corner of Maple and Losser, on the northeast corner, was a travel agency. And I remember walking up the door at 10 o'clock and the woman flipping the sign around, opening the door up, and she goes, what went on sale this morning? And I go, Van Halen, Cobo Hall. And she goes, oh, like she knew there was no way I was showing up to book a cruise. 17-year-old kid, right? So I go, Van Halen, Cobo Hall. She goes over, fires her computer up, and she goes, well, here's what we've got. And there were main floor seats, and they call them risers, like almost like, the seats you see in a basketball gymnasium in high school. But the risers actually had chairs. But she goes, you can get these seats right here, but they were already selling out. She goes, but these risers are still available right here. And I said, boom, I want 2 of those. All I had money for is 2. And so I bought the 2 tickets, and I went by the gas station because all the guys who worked there were friends of mine. And I walked into the gas station. I'm holding these things up like this, going, guys, check it out. Van Halen. I got good seats to Van Halen. And one of my friends turned. He goes, what? Van Halen went on sale just now? I go, yeah, it just went on sale. He turns to the boss, who's the owner of the station, and he goes, can I go get tickets really quick? And the boss goes, get back as fast as you can. And my friend Mark jumped in his 442. He had a green 442. He jumped in that thing, and 10 minutes later, he comes walking back in. He's got tickets too. And I go, dude, where are your tickets? He shows them to me. We're sitting like 3 feet apart because he bought tickets right behind where I was sitting. I'm like, whoa. And I remember going to that show at Cobo Hall. And it may have been the first concert I ever saw at Cobo Hall. I'd seen other things there, like the Autorama and the Auto Show. And I'm trying to think what else. But I remember going to that show. So I saw that show with Van Halen at Cobo Hall. And the following year, I was actually working as an intern at WABX and got backstage passes and saw them that year also. So I saw them 2 years in a row. So one year, I was very, very close to the stage up front, The second year, backstage watching the show from the wings, which is a pretty cool experience, which I can't get tickets like that anymore. But it was a lot of fun. It was a great show. And this was at the peak of their abilities. And if you know Van Halen very much, they later on had trouble with David Lee Roth, and they changed lead singers. They had Sammy Hagar and Gary Sharon, blah, blah, blah. And so, of course, Eddie's gone now. But if you wanted to pick an era to see Van Halen where they were on top of their game, it was the 2 years I saw them. Because in later years, before they got rid of David Lee Roth, there were occasions where he'd come out on stage and you forgot the words to songs. I mean, it was bad. And I remember, I don't play the guitar, okay, but I've got brothers who do, and I've been a fan of rock music my entire life. And I remember about 3 minutes in to the Van Halen show, because obviously it's a warm-up act, about 3 minutes into the show, watching Eddie play, and you realized, you're like, oh my gosh, like there were three important people in the history of guitar playing: Les Paul for inventing the thing, Jimi Hendrix for showing what could be done with it, and then Eddie for showing us what was still possible after Jimmy left us. And watching Eddie play the guitar the way he played it, where his fingers and hands are moving so fast, you're not even sure what they're doing. And he's also doing all kinds of hammer-ons and pull-offs and tapping. And I mean, he's doing stuff that other guitar players were studying for the next 2 decades. And the sound he was getting from his guitar was also stellar. And on top of that, he was running around the stage like a mad person, the same way David Lee Roth was. So David Lee Roth was famous for coming out wearing spandex and jumping around like a maniac and doing the splits and kicking the air and all this stuff. And he was an interesting person to watch because of the energy he had and how he could do that. He's a great front man for a band. But Eddie was doing what Eddie does while also running around the stage. He's like running backwards across the stage, doing some complex fingering on his guitar, where you're like, the average guitar player who studied that for a year couldn't do that sitting in a chair. And Eddie's doing it running around like a maniac also. And I remember leaving that show going, oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. So I got to see them twice in the David Lee Roth original era. Haven't seen them since, but it was a fabulous show. But I remember racing down Maple Road, 9:55 in the morning, to get to the place that had a CTC terminal to get the tickets. I paid face value for them. So that's the way things ought to be, but I don't think we'll ever get back there. So who knows? We're going to talk in a second about a pretty cool musical story out of Detroit right after this on My Michigan Television.
A message from Detroit to everybody. The adventurers, the explorers, the nomads, and the foodies, the art enthusiasts, and the music lovers. When you're ready to come, Detroit is ready to go. From shopping and museums to restaurants, parks, and more, Motown has way too much to do in just a single day. When the time is right, all this is waiting for you in Detroit. Begin planning your next trip at visitdetroit.com.
Don't miss out! Download the My Michigan TV mobile app to stay up to date with all of our programming.
Welcome back to My Michigan Television. Saw a great story in the paper today in the Free Press about the story behind the song, Detroit City. Detroit City. A lot of songs have been written about Detroit, and Joe LaPointe points out that in his current book, Bob Dylan critiques 66 popular songs to explain how music reveals the character of a culture. And the name of Dylan's book is The Philosophy of Modern Song. Bob Dylan, I'll admit, when I was younger, I didn't quite understand what the deal was with Bob Dylan. Bob Dylan wrote a lot of music, performed a lot of music, and if you hear him sing his own songs, sometimes you listen to him and go, I'm not sure I get that. And then you hear someone else perform one of his songs. Speaking of Jimi Hendrix a moment ago, All Along the Watchtower, I tell people, I say, Hendrix is a genius, not just with a guitar, but because he heard All Along the Watchtower by Dylan and thought, hey, wait till you see what I do with this song. And so a lot of his stuff was, in my mind, popularized by other people performing his music. And a lot of stuff he's done is just spectacular in the hands of other people. Now, as I've gotten older, I've grown to appreciate his performances a little more. But quite often, I still like the performances by other people. So he then has now written a book where he describes the philosophy of modern song, and he looks at songs that other people have written and digs into them a little bit and analyzes them. And he can do that because he's one of the most, if not most well-known and prolific songwriters of our era. The number of songs he's written that you've heard is up there. So page 1, chapter 1, talks about Detroit City, Bobby Bear's classic that was a country song that crossed over to the pop music charts in 1963. And of course, it's a disillusioned Southern white man in the story who comes north to the Motor City. And he makes cars, he makes money, but he feels homesick. As many might remember, he pronounces the place as Detroit City. Detroit City. A lot of people do. Home folks think I'm big in Detroit City. From the letters that I write, they think I'm fine. But by day, I make cars. By night, I make bars. If only they could read between the lines. I want to go home. Bear recorded and released the song 60 years ago this spring. On the Billboard charts, it reached 6th on the country western list and 16th on the pop list and launched his successful career. And as you probably know, if your song breaks into the top 40, it gets a lot of airplay back then on top 40 stations. So CKLW, the Big 8, would have played this song, right? WABC New York would have played it, and so on. It wasn't until Detroit City came along that I realized I was never going to have to get a real job. Bear told the website All Access Pass. That was a great big relief for a guitar picker. Bear was born in Ohio, but grew up in Kentucky, now lives in Nashville. Bear's son, who is Bobby Bear Jr., said in a telephone interview from there that his dad is doing good this week. He's 87. He's 87. And he said it's tough, really tough, but he's 87, so he's in there. Bobby Jr. also is a guitarist and songwriter and said his son, Beckham Bear, spends time with his grandfather to learn the tricks of the trade. He teaches my son guitar chords when my son's over there playing music. He's an extremely good piano player and guitar player. And now he's referring to his son. He's 16 and he's creating music. So it's a whole family of music. When Dylan's book was released late last year, the Bear family was pleasantly surprised by a black and white photograph that showed Bobby Jr., his brother, and his parents standing by the shore of a lake. Everyone is hugging and smiling. The photo appears to be from the early 70s and is credited to the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. And Junior says, Dad got a message from Bob Dylan's management that is going to be in there. And they sent Dad the book. And Dad called me and said, hey, we have the best picture I've ever seen of our family. And it's in this book. Bobby Sr.'s big hit came early. and a musical decade, best remembered in Detroit for Motown, for the raucous rock and roll concerts at the Grande Ballroom, and for young Canadian artists like Joni Mitchell or Neil Young, clubbing their way to fame around the Motor City. In addition, Dylan's essay cites Detroit, the home of Motown and Fortune Records, birthplace of Hank Ballard, Mitch Ryder, Jackie Wilson, Jack White, Iggy Pop, and the MC5. And with the migration from Dixie, Detroit also spoke with a country accent. According to Dylan, when Detroit City was written by Danny Dillett and Mel Tillis, Detroit was a place to run to. New jobs, new hopes, new opportunities. Cars came off the assembly lines and straight into our hearts. But some of those hearts were broken, and the men who left the gentle fields, streams, and woods of the mild rural South for the concrete streets, sidewalks, and alleys of the cold urban North. Dylan opens his essay with, "In this song, you're the prodigal son." And he ends it with, "Like thousands of others who left the farm, came to the big city to get ahead and got lost." Bobby Jr. agreed, and he cited the same recurring sentiment in other songs, like his father's exquisite version of 500 Miles. Dylan pretty much nailed it, he said. At the time, there were a lot of people a long way from their homes in the South, going up to Michigan and Chicago, things like that. The song was originally titled, "I Want to Go Home," a phrase that dominates the chorus. The record found little success when first recorded and released by Billy Graham in 1962. But Bear heard it, performed it, and loved it. He said, "I heard Billy Graham's record of Detroit City while I was driving down the street one day and damn near wrecked my car." Bear said, "I thought it was the greatest song I ever heard in my life." At its worst, a critic might pan Detroit City as lachrymose, maudlin expression of self-pity and overwrought sentimentality. But at its best, its fans know it is a realistic depiction of honest emotion about real-life depression for some folks who lived around here. In other words, it's an ideal country western lyric. Of course, such themes are not limited to one musical genre. With a much different style, the soul singer Otis Redding delivered it with his posthumous hit, "Sitting on the Dock of the Bay." That was released 5 years later. Like Bear, Redding sang of cognitive dissonance after leaving the South. "I left my home in Georgia, headed for the Frisco Bay. I've nothing to live for. Looks like nothing's going to come my way." And Gladys Knight struck the same chord in that same era with "Midnight Train to Georgia," because LA proved too much for the man. He couldn't make it, so he's leading a life he's come to know. Train trope echoes on the narrated bridge spoken by Bear in Detroit City. "I rode the freight train north, Detroit City. After all these years, I found I've just been wasting my time. So I just think I'll take my foolish pride and put it on a southbound freight and ride." This part impressed Dylan. Dylan loves them trains. What is it about lapsing into narration in a song that makes you think the singer is suddenly revealing the truth? Like I like to tell people, when you're listening to a Tina Turner song and she starts talking, you know you're in trouble. There's a few songs by Tina Turner where she's singing, and in the middle of the song, she starts talking, and you're like, oh, someone's in trouble here. Bear later recorded other hits like "Drop Kick Me Jesus Through the Goalposts of Life," which, by the way, is one of the best song titles ever written, country or otherwise. And you know darn well that when somebody came up with that line, the rest of the song just writes itself. Marie Laveau and "I Drink." One of his writing collaborators was Shel Silverstein, better known to some audiences as the author of the classic children's book Where the Sidewalk Ends. But Shel Silverstein also wrote A Boy Named Sue for Johnny Cash. He wrote, of course, the Unicorn Song, the Irish Rovers had a big hit with. And he, of course, wrote Sylvia's Mother, the Dr. Hook song, which is a classic beyond all classics. So he wrote for a lot of people. The three I just gave you are the three he's best known for, but he's written a lot of songs also. Bear was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2013. Many artists have recorded Detroit City. One was Tom Jones, whose slick version includes horns, strings, Elvis-like inflections, and an ad lib, somebody help me, that is unintentionally on point. Tom Jones. What's new, pussycat? Regarding the Jones version, Barrett told the website, classicbands.com, I thought it was pretty lame. No, it's not common for musicians to criticize each other. I know some of them do. And quite often you'll hear a rendering of a song and you're like, what on earth was that all about? But it probably appeals to somebody, right? His son said the success of Detroit City inspired his dad to record an album of city songs about places like Abilene and Memphis. Bobby Jr. still sings Detroit City in his shows, and he estimated that Bobby Sr. performed Detroit City thousands of times and never got tired of it. According to his son, Bobby Sr. often says, thank goodness I love this song, because if I had a hit that was a song I didn't love, I'd be a miserable guy. That is actually a profound point. A profound point. I heard an interview with John Popper, the lead singer and harmonica player, okay? Blues Traveler, John Popper. And they had a hit with a song called Runaround. And it was one of the biggest radio hits of that era. And it got airplay on top 40 stations, adult contemporary stations, middle of the road stations. It was played everywhere, everywhere. And so when you go see Blues Traveler, and I've seen them, and they perform, they will perform Runaround. They have to. They have to, and they will. And so I saw an interview with John Popper where somebody said, seriously, dude, don't you get sick of playing that song? Because even if you like the song, it's got to grate on you after a while. And John Popper said, no. He goes, as a musician, all musicians start out struggling. They're struggling to get discovered, to get heard, to get bookings, struggling to get airplay, struggling for people to take them seriously, struggling to get gigs on television, so that when something comes along and launches, it's a hit. You've got a hit. He goes, you can never lose sight of the fact of how important that is to your career. He goes, if later on I'm on stage someplace, people are in the audience, they want to hear that song. There's no question. And I will play that song. And on some level, it might be a song I've played a lot of times, but I will play it because I have so much respect for what that song did for my career, and also how it probably drew a lot of the audience here. And I have seen bands play and skip some of their biggest hits. I mentioned earlier a band called Blue October. I've seen them perform 3 times. They do not do the song I like the most by them. Now, they've been touring for 20 years. And the song I want to hear them do is a 25-year-old song. And it was one of their first big hits. And it's actually how I discovered that band. And I went and saw them perform live, and they didn't do the song. And I'm like, what's going on here? I went and checked. There's a place called Set List on the internet. If you ever want to find out what songs a band plays when performing, look up Adele, for instance, on Set List, and it'll show you all the set lists of all of her recent shows. You can look those up going back for years. I could look up right now the set list from Cobo Hall of Van Halen back in 1979. It's on there. I guarantee it's on there. Guaranteed. And so I looked it up, and Blue October never does this song. I've seen it 3 times. By the time the 3rd time, I'm like, I know they're not going to do that song. They'll do other songs I like, but they won't do that one. And it drives me crazy. Now, I remember seeing the Beach Boys, and the Beach Boys have got, 50 top 40 songs, and they'd play almost every single one of them, but they'd hit the big ones, right? Good Vibrations, I Get Around, Barbara Ann, Little Deuce Coupe. They would do all those songs. And I saw them after they put out a recent album. They'd play 1 or 2 songs on a new album, and then the rest was just all the classics that you knew. And I remember sitting in the audience at a Beach Boys show, towards the end of the show, trying to think, okay, what haven't they played yet, and what are they saving for the encore? And they'd always save 2 or 3 big songs for the encore. Fun, 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 Help Me, Rhonda, whatever it is. Yes, I know an awful lot about the Beach Boys. That's not the point here. The point is, that if you've got the big song Detroit City and that launched your career, you better darn well play that every single show you do. When somebody comes and sees you 20 years after you had the big hit and you don't play that song, they're going to leave disappointed. And do you want people to leave disappointed? And I've seen rock stars talk about songs they can't stand performing anymore. It's like, dude, shut up. Shut up. Because your fans like that song. That's why they discovered you. That's how they first found you. So it's important that you keep an eye on that. So that's Bobby Bare and Detroit City, admired so deeply by Bob Dylan, and he would know. So hang on for just a split second. We're going to talk about a really cool thing that you could buy up north right after this on My Michigan Television.
What makes a destination special? Experience wide open spaces, peaceful lakes, winding trails, sweeping vistas, and flowing rivers. All natural, all good, all fun. Your all outdoors adventure awaits at GaylordMichigan.net.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
If you're ever out driving around out in the boondocks, up north, just Upper Peninsula, Lower Peninsula, country roads, dirt roads, once in a while you'll pass by some cool old building. You go, that's a cool building, you know? And you start thinking about what was that building before? And what would happen if you bought that building? Well, it turns out there's a building you can buy right now. Now it'll cost you, but for $198,500, you can buy an old Michigan railroad depot and save some up north history. And it's going on in East Jordan. That's northern end of the Lower Peninsula. And Frank Witzel wrote about this for the Detroit Free Press. And what's cool about the story is right now there are people in the audience going, East Jordan. Why have I heard of East Jordan? Next time you're walking across the street someplace in Michigan, watch the manhole covers. And a lot of them will say made in East Jordan, Michigan. There was a place up there that did iron casting, and they cast the manhole covers, and you'll see them everywhere. East Jordan is the place these things are manufactured. So it's a centuries-old depot on a quaint lake. There's a city on a lake, and it's been emerging as an up north vacation destination, and the depot is for sale. I think I got that quite confusing, but you get the point, right? It received social media attention after a native woman up there, a Michiganian and real estate agent from nearby Boyne City, visited the depot and posted photos of it online. Now, she's not the agent listing this. She just said that she and her husband were looking at it and thought it was a cool thing. So they're out there walking around, checking out this cool building. And she posted photographs of it on social media. And next thing she knew, her phone was blowing up, as they say. So the agent who's listing the former train depot says the building is 4,200 square feet. He doesn't know much about its history, but it appears to have been built at the beginning of the 1900s, time when train travel was essential in Michigan. It sits on 5 acres near the Jordan River estuary. The property owner currently, however, does not know much about the history either. So it's just a cool old train depot. And a Michigan couple bought the depot a few years ago. And in some ways, the building is frozen in time. The sign in the building that says E&J Southern Railroad, established 1901, is still on the building. EJ stands for East Jordan, and inside is a bunch of stuff that the owners just left behind. The husband had used the building as an office, but he passed away. So a man and a woman bought the place. He used it as an office. He passed away. The widow remarried and moved to New Jersey and has no longer any need for a 100-year-old train depot. So it's on the market if you want to buy it. For years, East Jordan was better known as the headquarters of the company that made Detroit's manhole covers. And railroads played a huge role in the state's history. And that was, of course, vital to developing Michigan's population, commerce, and industry. Gradually, however, as the nation's road system developed and improved, the use of automobiles and trucks replaced rail travel, and thousands of miles of track and numerous old train depots in the state have declined and then been abandoned. Now, the realtor says the rail line outside the East Jordan Depot has long since been removed, although the path is still there. The building has charm, despite it being more than 100 years old, and is in need of considerable rehab and restoration. There are several in the community that would like to save it. I would like to save it as well, but no one has stepped up yet. Now, the locomotive and coal car that used to steam by the depot is on public display in a nearby Sportsman's Park. And it's cool when they save stuff like this. They even saved an old car like this, an old train car like this, over, I believe, in Cadillac. And if you ever look at aerial photographs on like Google Earth, you'll often see the obvious old train tracks, even though the train tracks are no longer there because they were carved out on the map. And the tracks were there for so long that trees and such didn't grow there. And then when they removed the rails and often the ties, then there's this trail, and they'll often turn those into a rails to trail conversion, but you can see the old train tracks from that aerial view. I've mentioned before that my mother's family is from a town called Alston, not far from Nissola, just west of Baraga. Kid you not, in the UP. And when I was a little kid, you used to hear stories from my grandmother and my mother about the area. And in that area, there had been some sawmills and a shingle mill, a mill that made shingles out of wood. And the foundations of those buildings were still there. And my brothers and I used to play on these foundations and have just endless fun on them. And I remember hearing stories about an old railroad track that used to run by there and service those mills. And we knew where it was because we used to walk up and down it to get to different places that we couldn't get to by road. And there were still places where you could see the ties in the ground, but they were now covered up with dirt and stuff was growing there. And but the rails had been removed. And I believe they got removed during World War II because the railroad itself had been abandoned long before that. And so during World War II, we gathered up all the scrap steel we could find and used it to build weapons of war. And so I remember walking up and down these train tracks as a little kid, but the rails were gone and the ties were still there. And I went back as an adult and the area had grown over to the point where it was even hard to see where that trail had been. But of course, this is 40 years later. So I remember going onto Google Earth and still being able to see where the trail had been because the railroad had been there for so long, so many years, had made a permanent mark that even though trees were growing, they were still smaller trees than the trees that were next to it. And so it's interesting how this stuff sticks around, but this depot is still there. You can buy it for $198,000. It's on Depot Street, which shouldn't be hard to find. East Jordan, 4,200 square feet. It has 4 offices, a waiting room, a cargo area, and an old weight scale. But unfortunately, the trains don't come by here anymore. So the depot is there, but the trains are not. So check that out. I thought it was pretty cool. That's up for sale. If I had more money to spend and more time to spend up there, I consider buying myself, but I don't know what I would do with it. So there you go. But the train depot is a very, very cool thing. And I hope somebody buys it and just hangs onto it. Because otherwise, it'll probably run down, fall down, possibly burn down. Don't want that to happen. So I will see you tomorrow. That wraps up today's show on My Michigan Television. Tell them to behave yourself. Bye-bye.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone, too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.